Hi, my name is Cameron Thomas. I have the pleasure of serving as the pastor of Hutchinson Missionary Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama, and also serve as assistant vice president and dean of chapel at Talladega College. What a joy it is to be participating this year at Animate 2024 as the pastor in residence. This conference represents all that is beautiful about the kingdom of God. It shows us not just simply who it is that we are, but also our capacity as a community of believers and as faith communities in order to grow together. And we get to do that amongst teenagers this week. A pressing question for me is centered around how is it that we as preachers on a regular basis take into consideration our teenagers who are sitting in our congregations. One thing that has been startling to me is that conversations and dialogue around preaching has very little space to include teenagers, to include young people. What is a way in which we can, in our preaching, move from the biblical text to what was to our contemporary context, centered around the here and now, and yet bring alongside not just simply our parishioners and their varying occupations and responsibilities, but also making space for our congregants who are people on their cell phones and people who may be more captivated by an Instagram or TikTok video. One thing that has startled me, as well as has served as a beginning in thinking about engaging teenagers in preaching, is centered around asking questions that place the preacher in the seat, not of their academic study, not just merely for their own personal experience, but what is the way in which this text is able to be applicable to the specific stage of life for teenagers. Well, one of those opportunities is centered around who is it that we bring to the table with us as we are shaping our sermons? If we have little space for our teenagers, if we have little space for our children and young people, it is just the same that we must consider, centered around how is it that we can engage people from varying socioeconomic status, people from varying ethnic, demographic, and experiences and backgrounds. But preachers, I'm inviting you to make more room at the table. Not merely to say, oh, this is the sermon that I preach specifically for teenagers, but what is a way in which we can step out of our world into their world? Let's use our trustworthy research assistant, our Google. Use that to see what are things if we're talking about anxiety. Let's not just simply explore the data around what this looks like for people in the adult stage of life, but also how is this impacting our teenagers? If we hear of a story in our reading and perusing that involves a teenager, one student made note, every time my preacher gives an example, and it's even close to their children or even close to their grandkids, they always posture them as adults. Oh, my child who now has a child. But what is a way in which we can center the experience of our teenagers as we're developing illustrations, as we're developing application? What is a way in which we can incorporate their language into the language in which we are engaging with in developing our sermon? One of the greatest things about preaching is that preaching invites us with sensitivity to not only the biblical world, but also the contemporary world of our audience. And how is it that we can go back and forth from the contemporary world to the biblical world? How can we go from what is now to then, but also what was to what is now? And as we speak that language, we are able to engage and connect with our congregants in a capacity that they too can say, "Speak, Lord, your servants are listening."